About a year and a half ago, I made my first ever video where I coined the T3 stack. In that video, I made an app where you can vote on which Pokemon is most round using all the tech that we love here. Next.js, Prisma, Planetscale, tRPC, Vercel, all the usual stuff. But I wanted to go in further. The stack has changed a lot since. The T3 stack is its own big viral thing. I've seen dozens of other creators making tutorials of their own. But I wanted something official, and I put a lot of effort in for this. So we're going to build a full, round-up clone of Twitter from scratch with one catch. You can only post emojis. I think this is going to be really fun. It's a great highlight of just how much you can get done with the stack from zero to production ready. I went out of my way to make this tutorial both beginner-friendly and useful to experts. Make sure you watch to the end because there's some really cool stuff I don't want you to miss about how to take this tech and push it really far in production. Everything here can be done by any developer and can be shipped to the scales of millions. This is the exact same stack we see companies like Cal using, obviously Vercel, myself at Ping, and I can't recommend it highly enough. Some quick notes about the services we'll be using today. They all have insanely generous free tiers, like you can scale to tens of thousands of users generous free tiers. I don't know how they stay in business. On top of that, I've been deploying on all of these services for months, if not years, some of them for the better half of my career. And also, these brands are all sponsoring the channel. They're part of the T3 Deploy Partner Program. They are not sponsoring this video. They have no say in what we're doing in here. I'm using them because I like them, but they do sponsor me in order to support the channel. I hope this is helpful. We've put a lot of effort into this tutorial. So without further ado, let's get started with the official T3 stack tutorial, building an emoji-only Twitter clone. With all new projects I start, I tend to do the same first 3 steps. First, initialize. Second, get it on GitHub. And third, get it deployed. I like to deploy my applications really early during my development process so I can be sure everything's working in production. That way, if I run into problems later on, I can go back to the latest working version and figure out what's changed since. I find that if you wait to deploy, it becomes much harder to understand why things are going wrong. So make sure you deploy early and often in all of your development process. As with almost all projects I do nowadays, we're starting with a great community-created tool, Create T3 app. If you haven't seen it before, Create T3 app is a fantastic way to get started with your Next.js project. It comes with all of the T3 stack technologies, at least the open source parts. We're not going to use all of them in this project, and I'm going to show you how to replace the ones that we're not using with the ones that we will be. The goal of this stack is to be modular and type safe without compromising on the scale of your applications. It's one of the easiest ways to get started and build really powerful applications. So let's do it. Literally, you can just click copy, here. So when we create with Create T3 app, you have the options to choose between JavaScript and TypeScript. We're going to choose JavaScript because I want to show you it's the wrong option. You can actually only pick TypeScript. As much as I love Next.auth, I have grown to prefer third-party auth solutions. We'll be using Clerk for this video. We'll get into that in just a bit. But for now, we're going to check all the other options because we are using Prisma, Tailwind, and tRPC. So we select all those. We want to initialize a new repo. Run npm install. Sure. That's a fine alias. And in just a moment, we're going to have a fantastic setup. And for those inevitably asking, why not PNPM or Yarn? They're fine. PNPM is better. Yarn's kind of dead, but none of it matters. I'm using NPM because it's the default. Everyone has to have it installed anyways. It's the easy one. So we're using NPM. Anyways, we're going to go into the project. Chirp. Going to use the shortcut to open up VS Code. And here we have all of the files for the project. The first thing I like to do, as I mentioned before, is commit. Getting started. And then we need to put this on GitHub. The easiest way to put it on GitHub, honestly, is to go to the GitHub website. On the top right here, which you're not gonna be able to see because my little thing in the corner is covering it, is a little add button. Little add button, new repo, owner, myself. I'm part of a lot of projects. That's why that option is there. We'll name this Chirp. Gonna make it private for now. We can make it public after the tutorial is done. And we specifically don't want to check any of these options because we already have the repo on our machine, and those will make a new repo with stuff in it. So we can push an existing repo, copy the contents here, paste it in our terminal. And now this is up on GitHub. If I refresh here, you'll see the project is here. So let's run it on our machine to make sure everything works. npm run dev. Spin this up. Everything connects fine. Hello from tRPC. This all looks good. Let's get it deployed really quick as well. So how are we going to deploy it? You all know how we're going to deploy it. Vercel.com. Ignore the absurd amount of projects I have in here, including something very similar to this one that I totally didn't build from scratch to make sure I could do this project well. New project. And if you haven't already signed into Vercel, you sign in with your GitHub account, you'll immediately have access to all of your GitHub projects, including the one we just made. Import. Scroll down, click deploy. We don't have any environment variables yet, but if we did, they're very easy to add. I can go to the environment example here, copy, and you can copy the contents of this file and paste, and it will automatically split it accordingly. We don't actually want those variables. We're totally fine for now, but deploying. I do think something's going to go wrong when we deploy, though. Just as expected, we're getting an invalid environment variable. This is one of the coolest things createT3 app does. The file's a little complex, but don't let that scare you. Inside of the environment.mjs file, we actually validate the environment variables that you're running with. So if you forget to include, in this case, your database URL, you're going to get an error in production or wherever else you're building, letting you know that this value doesn't exist when it should. We already have it in our .env here, which is why we didn't run into that error, but in production, we don't have a value there. More importantly, though, the database URL we're using here is for SQLite. We don't want to use SQLite. We want to use Planetscale because we want a database that scales. This is a production-ready application after all. So let's go initialize a new database on Planetscale. Planetscale.com, signing in. Now in my personal, and create a new database. It's important to make sure that the location of your database is the same or as close as possible to where your Vercel functions are being deployed. I'll be using US West 2 for Vercel, so I should also use US West 2 here. We'll name it chirp DB. Cool. Now we have a database for chirp, and in here we have methods to connect. There's actually an option you can click here for Prisma that'll tell you exactly what you need to put. This is a password, so I'm gonna have to reset this after. It's important to know when you're like live or showing this code to other people that these values should not be publicly shared and they shouldn't even be committed. When I put this inside of here, you'll notice this file doesn't trigger anything in Git. We actually git ignore the .env in createT3 app because it is so important you don't accidentally leak these values by committing them. So we ignore this, definitely the right call. We've gotten some arguments about it, but trust me, you don't want to commit your environment variables. It's not worth the risk. If we go back to the .env, we have the database URL, but we also have to make other changes for Planetscale because right now it's set up for SQLite and we want it to use Planetscale MySQL. So if I search Planetscale, Planetscale Prisma quickly, Prisma quick start, scroll. I already have that all installed. And here is what I was looking for. Gonna yoink that. We're gonna go back here. We're gonna hop into the Prisma file, schema.prisma. This is what Prisma uses to generate and connect to your database. Very important. More importantly, we need to replace that. So now, instead, we're gonna use MySQL. We're gonna use the database URL from environment. We're gonna use Prisma for relations because Planetscale doesn't have traditional relations in MySQL because it's using Vitess under the hood. It's a bunch of technical mumbo jumbo. Just know that the way that they scale, you need to build your own relations more strictly with IDs, but you can use Prisma to make it feel almost identical to any other relation system in SQL. Really simple stuff. Once it's set up, don't think too much about it. I promise you it's not super important just yet. So now that we have this all set up and the environment variables changed, I should be able to npm run dev and connect fine here. More importantly, since we're using Prisma, I should be able to npx Prisma Studio, which gives me access to the DB directly. When I click here, we're actually going to get an error because the database is not synchronized with what we have in our schema. Our schema expects the database to have ID created at and updated at with this model example, but we haven't created any models in the database. The easiest way to do that with Prisma, npx Prisma DB push. This tells Prisma to take the current state of things in your schema and set that to the database wherever it is. Usually I would use a separate branch for doing my development from the production database branch, another cool Planetscale feature, but for now, doesn't matter, just gonna synchronize to production, use the same database for both. It's not too hard to deal with. Now that we have that done, we should be able to npx Prisma Studio again. And this time, there are no rows in the table. And from this UI, we can add new rows if we'd like. Super cool feature. Prisma Studio is one of the coolest parts of Prisma. I got a ton of value out of that. We'll be using it a bunch later in the tutorial. More importantly, we can now push these changes and deploy. So first thing, git status When I'm adding on Git, I like to use -p after git add so I can pick the parts I want to add. It's like a mini code review as you're doing your changes. It's really helpful. I'm gonna add that, git commit, move to MySQL. Now that we have done that, I am able to grab the environment variable we have here. Yoink. Hop back here. Go back to Vercel. Refresh. Settings. Environment variables. Paste. Production. Normally you'd want a different branch for development, but I'm just going to use the same one for everything. It's way easier for now. Just a tutorial. But ideally you want to keep those environments separated. And now, if I was to redeploy, or actually it should be redeploying if I pushed. Oh no, that redeploy is going to fail because I did that before. So since I did that too early, I have to go in here and manually redeploy. But this time, since the environment variable that was missing is provided, it should deploy without issue. And look at that, generating without issue. Wait just a moment longer. We should have a production URL that works. There it is. If I go to chirp, RHO, whatever that is, ta-da, we have a production app on the web. Gonna go make sure I have the functions deploying in the right place quick. That's in settings under the project. Go to functions, you can pick. And look at that, it's not, we want this in PDX because that's Portland, Oregon, which is US West 2. Changing that, saving that, now it'll be updated the next time I deploy. Nice and easy. And we're done with that half. Cool. But we still need one more piece. Clerk has been made it way easier to manage auth, especially if mobile is also a problem you have to deal with. I'm really happy with the service. I couldn't recommend it highly enough. Let's get it set up super quick. So we're going to go to clerk.dev. Already signed in, so I can just go straight to the dashboard. We're going to create a new application, chirp. I don't like having email as a authentication method. I very much prefer to not do anything password related, so we're going to not. I also don't really want a Google sign in. What I want more than anything is just GitHub. We're going to hit the GitHub switch. We're going to turn off that other switch. Promise you, looks fine on my screen. This is just my contrast being weird for my screen recording. Cool. Once you've picked your authentication methods that you want to support, you're pretty good to get going. I'm going to be lazy and go through the next guide to set things up because it is that simple. There's a bunch of stuff like callback URLs that are normally obnoxious to set up that Clerk handles for you. You don't even have to set up keys for OAuth when you're still setting up. You can switch them in production later. So for now, we're going to just follow along with this guide. Oh, they have the new docs. We'll follow along with that. We're not using AppRouter just yet, so we're going to use the normal Next.js guide. First thing we have to do is install Clerk. Copy, paste. While that's going on, we're going to go back into the dashboard in order to grab our API keys. And these are for .env, so I can copy, go back in here, paste. More importantly, I can go to Vercel and paste the same values. Settings, environment variables, paste, save. And now we have those saved there. And if I did everything here correctly, then we should be able to get started. So I'm going to go here to the Clerk provider example where we wrap app with the provider. The value of wrapping your app with the Clerk provider is it means every component in the application has access to your authentication state. Really convenient for knowing if you signed in or not and rendering the right content. So we can go hop into the app file under pages_app. This file is kind of like a component that wraps your entire application. Very convenient to have something like this in your app. But yeah, dangerous to touch this component because when you do, everything you do to this affects everything in your app. But Clerk kind of should affect everything in your app because your authentication state is important. Autocomplete that import. I think that's all we have to do here. Yeah. Nice. All done. I think they have a middleware. Yeah, to use server-side functionality, you need to add the Clerk middleware to your Next.js app. Here's where things get fun for the stuff we're doing with createT3 app. This will allow us to have authentication when every server request is made by embedding the auth state inside of the request itself. Via the request, we know if a user's auth or not based on their cookies, but we don't know how to process that without doing it on each request. And rather than manually doing that when the request is received, we can do that as part of middleware on an edge before it ever hits our own servers. But if those words went over your head, don't worry about it. You're good, I promise. So we need to go into basically anywhere in here. Just put it in source, middleware.ts. It's a magic file name that tells Next.js, hey, this is a middleware. Just run this before everything else. Can delete all that because we don't need it. And I think we are done. Cool. Now middleware.ts will run on every request. We can console log here to be sure. Not running. And you can see here, middleware running, because that request is processed because every request gets processed through the middleware now. Awesome. Huge step. Since we have this all done, should probably add a sign in button, make sure it all works, right? Let's do that. Kill all these things we don't need anymore. Now there's a sign in component. We'll just use this for now. Go to pages, index. This is the home page. We can delete most of the contents here. Sure. And it doesn't render anything unless I put stuff in it, I'm assuming. No? It's a sign in button. This seems fine as a quick test. Oh, that was working before, I think. Yeah, now you have this sign in button. We can click that. You have the option, continue with GitHub or username. I don't want username as an option, so we're going to go back to the clerk.dev settings and make sure we have it set to only let you sign in with OAuth. We go to chirp. We go to user and auth, email, phone, off. Turn this off too. Yes, we don't want any contact info. We want the only method of auth to be GitHub. And if I refresh here now, look at that. Only GitHub is an option. Nice and convenient. Continue with GitHub. Failed to construct URL, invalid URL. Interesting. That might have been because I refreshed. Or it could be because I already had a cookie. Do that again. Cool. No error this time. Probably just because I did the weird refresh in the middle. But right now, we're not doing anything if we're auth or not. We have no way of knowing. So what we should do is const user equals use user. And then I like to double not when I do the syntax in React. So if yes, or if not user, which means if there is a user, or if there isn't a user, we do a sign in button, and we'll do the opposite for a sign out. So there is a user, sign out button. Oh, is it because user? Yep, it's because user has properties on it. So it's user is signed in. My mistake. There we go. Now the sign in button renders when we're not signed in. Click that. And now it's a sign out button instead. Ta-da. So much better. My bad on that. Anyways. Now that we have this all working, might as well get stuff started on the server, right? Let's do it. Git status, git add, git commit, add auth. And now we have our application authenticated up on the server, ready to get rolling. So let's get rolling. Sorry. Cat break. You know how it is. He gets needy. I've been trying one all week, so he's missed me a lot. One more important piece. We want to make sure we know when things go wrong in production. As much as I love the new Vercel logging system, I do want something a little more thorough. And when I'm looking for something more thorough, I go with Axiom. Axiom is incredibly easy to set up. You can sign in, use GitHub or whatever else. I have multiple accounts because I use it for my company as well. So I'm going to sign out of my company account. So I'm going to sign in with my GitHub instead. Org not found because that's not the one I'm using. Here's my open source org. We already have Vercel linked. If I didn't, it would be 2 clicks, but I'll show you what those clicks look like. I'm going to go to Vercel, settings, integrations. And once you get into integrations, you can just search Axiom, click, add, pick the org. I only have one, or you should probably only have one. I have a lot. You can pick if you want it for specific projects or all of them. In this case, I'm just going to pick chirp because that's the only project I need this for. Connect. And now all of the logs for this project will go straight to Axiom, where I can search through them and find them way more easily. Really, bud? Let's actually build the application now. That was all fun stuff, but we got to write some code, don't we? Thankfully, when things go wrong, it'll be very easy for us to identify when they went wrong and how they went wrong now we have everything else set up. So first off, we actually need some data to render. And in order to have data, we need to have a database. Let's hop into the database and we're going to make a new model for a post. Right now we have this model for example, which is a good starting point. Change this to post. We'll really need to update it at. I like using CUIDs for createProxySSGHelpers. It's a nice format because it is consecutive while still being unique IDs. Pretty convenient. You can make it anything technically, but I'll just leave that as the default. We have the createProxySSGHelpers. We need the content, which is also a string. And in Planetscale, or in MySQL, the string length is weird, so I'm going to manually set that to a var_char of 255, which means that it can be 255 characters long. Since they're emojis, a lot of them count as 2 characters. Managing that length will be annoying, but we'll get there when we get there, won't we, my mouse? Yeah. Let's need a user ID, which will be a string. I think that's it. Yeah, that's it. Guess we'll call it author ID. It's more accurate. You need to be able to look up all posts by a given author. We should have to go through all of the posts to find them. The easiest way to do that is to create an index. So in this case, at index, brackets, author ID. That's all you need to do. And now this will be indexed based on author ID. We can look up by that instantly instead of having to scavenge the whole table. We don't really need example anymore, so I'm going to kill that. I need to run 2 more commands, npx prisma db push. It's going to push the updates to Prisma. It says we're going to be dropping a table, which is totally fine. But we also need to generate the new DB state locally because this file isn't TypeScript, so our TypeScript code doesn't actually know anything's changed. Easiest way to do that is npm install. You can also do npx prisma db generate, but npm install will trigger that automatically. And now you'll see if we go into here, we're actually going to get an error on this get all call because .example no longer exists because of course it doesn't. We deleted it. So get all, now we want it to return posts. If I go here, we'll see post is now an option. Let's restart TypeScript. And ESLint quick. Seems like they're out of date. Cool. That's the TypeScript error. If you're not familiar, a TypeScript server error. If you're not familiar, TypeScript runs a server in the background. If you ever get an error and it doesn't seem right, Command-Shift-P, and you can restart the TypeScript server, and you should see things behaving as expected. And now, if I go back to the front-end code here, you'll see we got all this junk back. But more importantly, if I console.log hello.data, hover over this, you'll see data has a greeting, string, or undefined, which is not what we're looking for because this is API example hello use query. And we don't care about that. What we want to do is const data equals API dot example dot get all dot use query. And now data should have the correct type of post array. So if you're not familiar with tRPC, the syntax might look confusing. The TLDR is tRPC lets you create server functions that run on a server, in this case a Vercel server, to actually do things like fetch data from the database so that you can get that data in the right shape, authenticated and whatnot to your user without having the user run the database code themselves. You never want a user to connect directly to a database. When you use something like Vercel, it's way easier to deploy that connection method somewhere else. And here, with tRPC, it's just as easy to access that code, even though it's living on an entirely different server than the computer the user is using. And in order to get to that backend code, you can literally command click, and here it is. We currently have a router named example. If we go to the tRPC root here, you can see all that means is we have example router. We could rename this to whatever or create our own, which is what we're going to want to do here. We're going to create a posts router. Again, routers are just an arbitrary way to break things up. We could put everything in one router. I like this way of breaking things up though, so we're going to do it. Copy paste. We're going to rename this to posts router. We don't need hello anymore. We still can use a get all, so we'll keep that for now. I'm not using Zod just yet, but we will be in the future. A procedure is, in here we have a router, which we use the createProxySSGHelpers helper to create, and then we have a public procedure, which is a method to generate the function that your client calls. Public procedure is a procedure that anyone could theoretically call without being authenticated. In this case, we do want get all to be public because we'd want anyone to have access to all of the posts. If you can, should be able to open the home page without signing in. Should be nice and simple to work with. Now that we have this set, I can grab posts router. We can go back to the root. I can make a new key here, posts router. That doesn't exist because it hasn't been imported, but we can do that. I can delete example router. Honestly, we can just get rid of it. It's not being used for anything. Cool. And now we have this get all key. Go here, doesn't work. But the magic of tRPC is this will all autocomplete from here. .posts.getAll.useQuery. And again, I can command click and it brings me to the backend code from the front end code. These two different files run in two different places. This one runs on the user's device. This one runs on our servers, but we can still go back and forth between the two like they're on the same machine. It's such a convenient developer experience and it lets us move very, very fast. So now we're fetching all these posts. We should render them somewhere. I'll just put them under here. Div data.map post div post.content div. Cool. These are going to need a key, so post.id. Keys are a way that React uses to identify what should or shouldn't be updated. It's not super important, but it will keep the amount of times it has to render down slightly, so it's not the worst idea. Now, for every post, we'll have that render. If I was to go to localhost really quick now, you'll see nothing new because we made any changes to make it appear. There's no post in the database yet, so why would that appear? So how do we get a post? I could go write all the code to make a post, but I mentioned before, Prisma's Studio is very useful, and this is what I was referring to. So if I go to npx Prisma Studio, since we made changes to the DB, we have to reset the environment for our dev. So close and reset the dev environment when you make those types of changes just to make sure everything's up to date. Now that we've done that, I should be able to load this and not get weird errors anymore. More importantly, I can go in here, we can go to post, we can add a new record. First we need content, so we'll give this some eyes. Really? Save. Oh no, I forgot to give it an author ID. Oh, it didn't even give it the content. Yeah. Prisma, I love you. This tool is so awful. You have to click out to validate that. Save. And now it has the eyes in it. We'll get the author ID later because we want to see. There we are. And now new posts are rendering here. The goal here wasn't necessarily to make everything perfect. It's to show you that you can use Prisma Studio to quickly access and make changes so you don't have to build all of the environment just to test something quickly like rendering a post. More importantly though, now that we have that working, git status, git add, select. Add-p does not add new files, so I have to add this manually. Now that I've pushed that, with Vercel, all new pushes will automatically deploy. I can go in here. We'll see in the next 40 or so seconds, this should be deployed and working as expected. Pretty magical. And now we have the updated version. You can see the eyes are right there where they belong. Awesome. We've made so much progress in not a whole lot of time. Really proud of that. Let's actually finish building the app though. So we should start. We haven't really done anything even resembling styling. So let's get to that. First thing I want to do is ditch basically all the styles here. We'll just delete that for now. I do like to put some styles in the body, like I want to have the global background color and such, because if you don't put that in the CSS file, then it won't affect the first load, and it will only work once this page loads in. I want this to work always. And here we have the styles global file. Right now we're just importing the Tailwind stuff, all obviously set up for you by Create T3 app, super convenient. We want to do a little bit more. So we're going to have body at apply, BG black. Text we'll do slightly lighter than, or not white, but a gray. I like slate recently, so we'll do slate 100. If you're not already familiar with the Tailwind colors, they are incredible. If I type in Tailwind into the colors autocomplete, because I spend so much time on this page just ripping hex values. Sorry, words are hard. Such a useful page. All of the Tailwind docs are great, but man, the color system is incredible. I steal it for so much stuff. Now, if I go back to localhost, you'll see we have a black background with white-ish text. Ta-da! As much as I love how this looks, we could probably do a lot more with the styles, so let's do that quick. Close on all the tabs I'm not using. We should try and clone the Twitter classic centered view. We will do that quick. Prefer to do that here. We could do it in app, since it will affect every page. We don't necessarily want to change every page. You pick where you put it based on what you do or don't want it to affect. I'll probably just put it here and we can reuse it. We can even make it a reusable component in the future, but for now, just put it all in here. Love keeping things in one file, makes things nice and easy. So main, class, flex, justify, center, div. This is going to be like the main contents div. And to make sure we're modifying this correctly, class name equals bg red 200. That way we can see it against the background here. This needs a width, so w full max w2xl. Now it's going to be up to width 2xl. But what we can also do here is make that only happen when it's a certain size. So now we'll only have max width 2xl if the size is medium or larger. So on a smaller scale, it won't do that. I know the pink background's annoying, but it makes it way easier to know if things are working correctly. Also want the border. So border LR. Is there border X? I'm curious. There is. That's so convenient. God, every time I use Tailwind, I'm like amazed at the other things it has that I didn't know about. Kill the background color so we can see it more clearly. It's now apparent the height isn't high enough, so H full. That doesn't do it. We need the H full here. And that doesn't do it either because the body isn't big enough. Easiest solution here is going to be H screen. These now contradict. We'll get an error there because we have Tailwind linting. Super nice. And ta-da, we now have the border edges correctly placed. The border color there is a little bright though, so we're going to dim that down slightly. That's border slate. We'll do 200. Yeah. Just make sure. I'll try 400, see if it looks better. Ah, yeah, the 400 looks better. I like the dim there for that. But things are way too close here. I don't want to add padding there because I want to be able to do it inside elements in the future. But we should have this top nav be split in some way. Class name equals B or border B border slate 400. Now it has a border on the bottom. It should have padding. Let's do P4. Flex, justify. And we don't need to justify center. This all div and center. Class name equals flex, justify, center. And instead of a sign out button, we should render an actual like header component. We'll get there in just a bit. But now, I will leave the sign out for now. We should split the tweets better too. Class name equals P, we'll give it a bit more space. Border B border slate 400. So now there will be a line under each one. And this should be flex or class name equals flex call, so that it is a flex column. When we add additional elements in the future, we will have more. Easy way to test that is to do I'll say both exist even when they don't. And if no data return. Guess this is a good time to introduce you guys to one of the cooler features in React Query. I can have an isLoading check there. And if no data or is loading, we return loading. Ideally, what you would do is if is loading, return loading. And then if no data, return, see if Copilot's smart enough. Cool, it is. Something went wrong. And now we're sure by the time we're here that we do have data. So it shouldn't be mad at me for that anymore. Ta-da. Because it knows data has to exist at that point. Super convenient. I just did that quick so we can have multiple tweets. Obviously, don't do that in line like that. Just a temporary solution. Now we can see these are appearing correctly with the emojis. Okay, so instead of this bad sign up button, we should probably start creating like the traditional create wizard that we see on Twitter. I think this is best as a separate component just because it's like fully separate. We might want to reuse it on other pages. Const create post wizard. We're going to need the user's info here in order to actually render the preview for the user like ID and such. So we need the user info here. Const user. That'll be the user info. We can return something else if we don't have that. No user. Return. I'll just return null for now. That's fine. And then we now know the user has to exist. We could grab a mutation. We could go make the mutation. I don't want to do that just yet. I want to get this actually rendering something decent. Let's put the image in. Dot profile image URL. Nice. Alt tag is, that looks fine to me. We're not actually rendering this yet. We need to render this on the condition of user is signed in. So I can just do that. Now if user signed in, we'll have this, which is obviously way too big. So let's get to some Tailwind. Class name equals flex. This needs class name equals flex. This doesn't need to be a flex. This needs to be a size. We'll do W48, H48, rounded full. Ta-da. Still way too big. Let's go a bit smaller. With Tailwind, you can usually just bump up and down until you're close to what you're looking for and then adjust accordingly. We'll go way lower. We'll do 12. That's too small. 16. That looks about right to me. So maybe I'll go a tiny bit smaller. Yeah, looks good to me. We need to have an input here. Input. Just gonna have a placeholder. Type some emojis. See how that looks? Absolutely terrible. We got a lot of styling to do with inputs. Generally, default input styles aren't great, especially once you have like different default colors than you normally have in the browser. So let's give this some new properties. Class name equals. First, we need to get rid of the background. I killed the background. Honestly, it already looks way better. It's going to need some padding on the side. Where do we want to put that padding? So generally, I don't like using margins. And if we were to add padding here, it would effectively be behaving as a margin. Not the worst thing. Honestly, I often put like a little div between things. But for now, it's easiest to just put a gap. That looks like a decent space. Maybe a bit smaller. Yeah, that looks good. Cool. Now that we have the gap between the elements, this can expand as much as it needs to. And I can type. Should probably make this full size. Is this full size? BG red 200. It is not. Full. Much better. And then grow. Ta-da. Now it's all the right size. Kill that because we don't need it anymore. I don't like the outline on this. What's the code for that? It is outline none. Cool. Outline none. And now we have a pretty standard looking input that looks just like the one on Twitter. Nice. This all looks solid. Right now, clicking this doesn't do anything. We should make profiles work. We'll add other routes in the future, but I want to get this first page looking correct. Then we can go back in and add the rest of the functionality. So now that we have that, we don't have a way yet to render profile images here because as I showed before in the database, they don't exist. PX Prisma Studio. And you'll see in posts, we don't have an author ID, so we can't render anything yet. So we need to put an author ID there. Again, I don't want to do this all correctly just yet. So what I'm going to do instead is we're going to console log user dot I'll just console log user for now. In here, we should get a ton of stuff being logged. Has crazy things like backup codes, whatever. We don't need any of that. What we need is the ID. Now we have this ID. I can copy, go in here, paste, make sure we kill the quotes around it, save. Now we have the user IDs coming back here. There's a lot of ways we can get the data from that, but since we're not using a traditional relational database to have the users in the same DB, we do have a relational database technically. It's SQL-based. We could keep everything in sync using stuff like webhooks from Clerk, but for now, it's easiest to just get the data straight from Clerk. I don't think we need to do that on the client side when we can do it with a single call from the server. I'll show you how we do that real quick. So if we go to the place where we're actually getting this data, it is right here. Again, command click to bring us to the backend function. We're currently immediately returning the prisma.post.findMany. I don't want to immediately return a promise. I want to actually use that promise. So we're going to make this async. Const posts equals await. Also going to make one change here. Limit 100. I forgot how we actually do. Yeah, take. Again, type safety is incredible. It will auto, or you can, in this case, control space, and it shows you all of the unique options you have. If we only wanted to select post by a specific person, we could do where user or account, is it author ID we use? Yeah, author ID. And you can put a unique ID here, and now it will only select things like that. Autocomplete and type safety are so much easier to work with when you're building like this. So we have the posts here, but we don't have the users. All we have is their IDs, and we need more data. Specifically, we want to get the user profile image URL. So how do we get that from here? We use the Clerk API. I don't mean like go fetch stuff from Clerk. I mean we're actually going to use the Clerk client. It's super helpful. So we need Clerk client. So const users equals await Clerk client. Need to import this. Next.js server. See how convenient this is from Clerk? They will actually provide you with the Next.js package crazy things like this to just fetch like Clerk information. So Clerk client dot get, I think it's dot users, yeah, dot get user list. And this can take stuff, oh, That's pretty convenient. One of the keys the get user list call from Clerk can take is user IDs, which is a list of different IDs that you want to be fetching. So in this case, we want all of the author IDs from posts. And I can even limit this to be the same 100. So it will never be able to get more. Oh, is it user ID, not user IDs? So close, Copilot. There we go. Cool. User ID is a string array. This will get all of the users' information for these posts. And we can quickly console.log users here just to prove that. We'll continue returning posts for the time being. But when I go here, you can see we're getting a ton of info. But importantly, we're getting info we don't necessarily want the user to have, like password enabled, TOTP enabled, and all this other stuff. We don't want this to be returned for every user for every post. So we should filter this down. There might be a way to do that through the Clerk client. I don't care to do that. So we're going to do a custom function const filter user for client equals user. We'll get this from Clerk. We just want the type, so make sure that's type import. We can return the ID. I don't want to return all that stuff. Name user dot username. So we can keep calling this username just for consistency's sake. And we also could use the profile picture. User.profile image URL. Again, I'll try and keep the names consistent. Now when we pass this a user, we'll get back just these three things. So after we do the await here, we have users. We can filter. Well, it's not filter, .map filter. Needs to be wrapped. Wait syntax isn't the prettiest thing, but here we go. Now we have filtered users with these specific fields. Way easier to work with. And then when we want to actually return everything mapped, return posts.map, post. And this needs to have the post and author. Look at that. Well, this needs to be wrapped as an object. Now, for each post, we are grabbing the user that made it using the author ID. This is effectively creating a relation. So when we call this, I can go back to our client and hover over. We can just map over data, but we need to grab the post off this. So do that. We also have this user info that we didn't before. Oh, it's not user, it's author. And now we have this additional field that we didn't previously have, and we can do whatever we want with it. Super handy. And we know that because it's all coming back through TypeScript. This is part of the type definition. If I was to go back here and I was to rename that from author to user, I have to save before we get a type error over here because that's not named author. That's now named user. Super, super handy. Now we have this info. We're going to want to render way more here. I am certain we're going to need this somewhere else in the future, so it's easier to break it out to another component. Notice that I'm not using new files just yet. Don't make new files until you know something's needed somewhere else. That's how you end up with a bunch of files in your code base that no one's using for anything at all. Keeping everything in this file for now. We'll call it PostView equals, well, we need the info from this post. And here's where I'm going to show you guys a really fun trick in tRPC. Rather than having to define the type for what this takes, because like I could sit here and type out all of the things that a post view needs to render a post, but we have the type. It's whatever get all here returns. So I need one post off this. That seems like it's going to be obnoxious to get the type of, right? Well, we have a small trick for that. In the API, we have some helpers defined. We want to define a post type. So type post with user equals router outputs. Cool. This is a type. If I go here, it comes from the actual router that we've defined. You'll almost never need to be inside of this file, but it is useful to know what it does. It creates the actual tRPC Next API definition that we fetch from, but we also use that definition to generate the router input and output types. And since we have those helpers, I can now from here select posts and get all. And now this is going to be post with user, post author array, but we don't want that to be an array. We want that to be just one of the elements from the array. So we're going to do number. And now that tells TypeScript, hey, we want an element from this array type. And now we have here, post with user has, I don't know why I would have clicked to make that appear. Post with user is just one post and author, which means we can do props post. Keep hotkeying the wrong hotkeys, my bad. And now we can do whatever we want to in here. If I go back, I'm accidentally scrolling too far. My hotkeys are all being super weird at the moment. Yoink, return, yoink. Post probably isn't the best term for this since it has like a sub post. I guess I can just do props post with user. And then const post author equals props. And now that all behaves as expected. I can go back here. Do that. Rather than doing that, I'll do full post. And since this has two keys, like if I hover over, it has author and post because I dumped the prop directly, we can do the same here. Dump the prop directly. And it's missing a key, and we can get that easily with key full post dot post dot id. Oh, not double bracket maybe? Yeah, that was silly of me. Sorry. Cool. And now we will return one post for each, or we'll return one post view for every post properly keyed with all of that data, making it all the way through. We have everything that we need up here now too. Super convenient. One thing I did notice is that we're getting or undefined for the type here. That shouldn't technically be possible. There's a bunch of ways we can assert that that's not possible. The easiest one though, honestly, exclamation point. We might get an error saying forbidden non-null assertion. Not a big deal. The other thing we could do is throw if there's any that doesn't match. But yeah, this should be fine. We'll do it the right way. The easiest thing here is to not immediately return this. So no longer brackets there. At the bottom, return. Const author equals if no author, throw new tRPC. How do we do? Is there a message on tRPC error? I don't use tRPC error too much. I normally just throw because I'm lazy, but tRPC error is the correct way. It has an actual error code that will throw the right status symbol and such. And we need to put a message here. We'll say author for post not found. And now we know author exists. I can delete that. And now what we return should always have an author. Yep, author is no longer or undefined. Nice and simple. Again, TypeScript forcing us to actually check the things that we're doing. This makes sure each post has an author. And if it doesn't, we throw. And once we have all of the posts for each author, or once we have the author for each post, we return that all mapped together. And now we have all the data we need to render this correctly. Let's actually render image source equals author.profile image URL. And we'll see we have that same fun problem from earlier. Joy. How do we deal with that? Let's get to it. Well, obviously this needs to be flex. So flex, the start. Cool, that helped. I have no idea why there's this one post at the top and then the two after. That's a little sus. We'll just keep styling this for now and figure out what's going wrong in a bit. I'm going to yoink the image styles from here. We'll deal with alt in a bit. Okay, cool. That fixed that, but I don't know where this third post is coming from. Okay. Oh, I know what it was from. That was a bad state because the database, yeah. Why would that have been in a bad state? I can't sit here and honestly say why that happened. Sometimes if you see something weird, just do a refresh. I'm guessing that there was some persistent data from an incorrect state in the past. Hot module reloading isn't always the most reliable. Don't be scared to hit refresh every once in a while. Okay, so that padding is way too big. What are we using for padding in here? Looks like we're not. We have a padding for wrapping this section, so that's probably what we should use here. Yep, that is much more aligned. We want to get that text aligned as well, though. So let's fix that. So here that needs a gap. We did gap 3 before, I believe. Yeah, that looks nice. Now we need to actually do something with the content. Span. Honestly, this should probably be like a separate div. We also put the username there and such. Let's do that now. Div. I'll say class name equals flex call because it needs to be vertically stacked. And we're going to have the div with the username here. We'll also make this flex. This is going to need to have more info than just the username. Flex span. This will be author dot username. Have to close the bracket there. Now we have that. You can put the at here by putting it in the string out there. I try to avoid doing too much string stuff inside of the JSX template directly. So instead, we'll do this in a string template. I entirely missed all of that. At for the at sign, then $wrap that. Oh, because it could be null. I know what we can do. We can go back to this type definition. That is so convenient, being able to command click and go where you want to be. So up here, if no author or no author dot username. Ta-da! Now if we don't have a username, it will throw. No longer need to do that. Wait, why did that not work? Oh. That's annoying. We're actually unmapping the type. Wait, no, we're not. Or no author.username. Then at this point, yeah, that should. If no author or no author.username. Oh. Yeah, it's not deep checking enough. God, TypeScript's not the smartest always. Yeah, it's gonna. Yeah, it sees that correct. Okay, then why has it lost the type there? I guess author's type isn't asserted, but author.username. That's annoying. And now, yeah, TypeScript's stupid. Cool. We have now fixed that type error. No, that's not string or null. We need to restart ESLint. Yeah. Cool. So it is ESLint being dumb. There, that's now fixed. Author.username is valid. And if we look here, that looks correct. The actual font color looks super off though. So we'll give it text, slate 400. It's a little dark. We'll go with that. I'll do more styling in a bit. Should probably put the tweet like when it came from or what time it was posted at. That is a really nice feature. I like having the little dot. Honestly, the easiest way to get that little dot is to actually go to Twitter, find a tweet that has it, select it. That's a funny tweet at him. Now that I have the actual character, we'll just do 1 hour ago to see how it looks. Looks awful because we need more spacing between these things. Trying to think the easiest way to do that. There's a bunch, but I don't love any of them. Honestly, we can include this in the next span. It's going to need to be a string template anyways. We'll do that now. Knowing that that white space isn't being honored, but welcome to strange CSS behaviors where that gets killed. Why did that not happen when I did this before? Oh, it might be because I had a link around it before. I just put a fake A tag around this. Will that do it? I'm super curious. It won't. Good to know. Cool. And getting white space to behave is one of the most fun challenges in all of programming. Bolding that makes it look a good bit better. Put the space there, we'll do it. Nope. White space never gets white space never behaves. So that font being bold looks weird. Can I do class name equals font thin? Yeah, just put a gap. Will that work? I wonder. God, I hate CSS. We'll just put a 1 gap. That looks fine. CSS hacks. Obviously, you should make a better container for this. I don't care to. I'm also less in love with the bold, so I'm going to kill that. Yeah, that looks fine to me. Not perfect, but I've done worse for less. I would like it to actually put the date. The easiest way to deal with dates that I use nowadays is dayjs. The reason I'm thinking of dayjs is I love their relative time. That's not actually how you use the relative time plugin. Here it is. So with dayjs, you can install a bunch of extra things if you need them because they want to keep it small by default. So npm install dayjs. Let me go back here. Import dayjs from dayjs. Import. Look at that. Ta-da. And now you have dayjs with relative time. Funny enough, if you try to use dayjs without doing this, it's smart enough to yell at you when you actually try to use the relative time functions. So if I go back down to here, dayjs dot, I guess you just call it dayjs. We'll pass this the post dot created at dot relative, or I think it's time since. I wrote this somewhere. Oh, from now. There we go. Now, that shows correctly 18 hours ago because I took a break and went to bed. So that was actually how long ago I made that post originally. Super convenient. All in that one line. Honestly, this is a weird enough thing. I'd probably break it out into a separate component, but for now, this can all live here. It's easier that way. You might have noticed that all of the, oh, what is this mad about? Oh, because this is a type import. Cool. Now it'll stop complaining. Not using this anymore. We can kill that. So you might have noticed this yellow underline on the image tags. That's because we're not using Next Image. Next Image is a super nice plugin that Next.js provides that combined with Vercel will actually optimize your images so that they load faster and in the ideal condition for every device. You can also have blur hashes and other things to make the images look nicer as they fade in. It's a really nice plugin. So let's make the switch over. Switch this to image. Make the same change here. This one's still upset because I don't have an alt tag, so we will add the alt tag of the This one should be a little more specific since it's a specific user's profile picture. So we'll say at author.username profile picture. Nice descriptive alt text. It's missing required width property. Oh yeah, they like to have specific width and height properties. So width. The fuck is a safe number? Okay, what does 3.5 rem convert to? 56 pixels. And that means I need to go swap it above as well. Why was it not mad here? Oh, since it's going through Clerk.dev, we have to add that to let Next know, hey, by the way, you can optimize these images. It's safe. Trust me, bro. So we will hop to Next config, and that would go under... Easiest way is to look at the actual docs. Images, remote patterns. Easy. The domain's even easier. And the domain we needed was images.clerk.dev. Paste, save. And now, probably have to restart Next because there was a config change. And finally, if all goes well, we should have optimized images. Ta-da! We can do tons of fun stuff with that. I want to do blur hashes because they're really nice. Yeah, placeholder equals blur. Does it not automatically blur anymore? Used to create the blur placeholders. That's so sad. That's annoying. RIP. Whatever. Things load much faster now. Good changes. We've made a lot of changes I haven't committed in a minute, so I'm going to do that before I regret it. Next image tag. Style up. I think that's a fair description of what we've done since. Cool. I was noticing how awful the loading state currently looks. It also blocks on everything. Ideally, we would have a separate loading state for when this comes in versus everything else, especially since this will be blocked on database and this will be blocked on Clerk, which should resolve much faster. So let's break these things up a little bit. First, I want a nicer looking loading spinner. There's a lot of ways to get them. Since we are deep on Tailwind already, I'm just going to search Tailwind loading spinner and see what comes up. This looks perfect to me. So we're going to yoink, make a new file since this will be a reused thing. Since we don't have any reused components yet, I'm going to make a file for it, or a folder, components. In here, loading.tsx. Export const loading spinner equals turn. And it's going to be a couple instances of class. Select those, change the class name. Otherwise, that should be good to go. And if I go back, not to server, but instead to the actual page we were in, index.tsx, I'm just going to close everything else. I don't have to worry about it as much. Scroll down to here where we have the loading. So you have to import that just to see how it looks. That looks okay. Kind of prefer the white one. it have, I'm just seeing where the color's done. It's been dark. Oh, fill. Cool. Then let's go back to loading and see the fill, gray. Oh no, that's the same color. Was it gray 200 that they're using? Oh, gray 300. We're using slate for everything, so that's gonna stick out. Let's change those both from gray to slate. That looks really good. But it's also in like the worst possible place. There's a bunch of ways to handle it. Honestly, the one I found to consistently be the easiest is to do a separate component, const loading page. Class name. Y'all CSS wizards are going to hate me for this, but it's just so much easier to handle loading state this way. Absolute, top 0, right 0, W screen, H screen, flex, justify, center, align center, or align middle, I think. And then loading spinner. And this is what we're going to use instead. I'm also going to change this to is loading or true because I want it to always show. Cool. So I missed one of my properties. Is it items center? Yeah, it's item center. Cool. So align middle is not necessary then. It's also way too small. So let's fix that. We should have a way to increase the size. Okay, we have H8, W8 here, which are not ideal. Also a margin. Why do we have margin right 2? I do width equals 40, height equals 40. Yeah, cool, that works. So what we're going to do is have number or size be passed here as an optional number. Now you can pass the size, or it will be 40 by default. Oh, that needs to be under props. Duh. Cool. And now we have the option to pass the size here. So we'll pass this a size. We'll give it 60 because it's like the big one. Nice. Prop size or 40 is probably too big for a default. We'll do 16 because we're going to need this in a lot of other places. Right now, we're only showing that if user or data are loading. I'd prefer we only show this in the case of user. Actually, user's going to return fast enough. We should probably not show this for that case. We should just show nothing until we have that data. So let's do that for now. Also going to bind these both to names, posts loaded. So if no user loaded and no posts loaded, return. I'll do empty div. I'll put a comment because it's a weird behavior. Return empty div if both aren't loaded, since user tends to load faster. Cool. And we don't need to return loading page or something went wrong. Honestly, I kind of want to contain that feed in a separate component now because we're combining data flows here. The only issue is we won't start fetching this data. So how do we make sure the data is being fetched in both places, but also break that off and call the same hook twice? So let's do that. Const posts, or we'll call it feed, equals, this doesn't need to take any data in. We can yoink this guy, paste it here. we can yeah, we're checking for users state before. That's fine. We'll get there in a sec. I want to yoink this first. Yoink. Return. Yoink. Data. Oh yeah, if it's not defined, then we need to have the loading state. So if no data, throw new error. I'll just return it in line. Cool. Why would data be never then? Oh, it's posts loading. That was done with me. Posts loading. Because it's is loaded for the user one. So clerks and React queries conditions are inverted, which is a very annoying thing to deal with. So the only reason we're using this here, even though we're not using the data, is to make sure this fetches early. The other thing we can do is that start fetching ASAP. Cool. Because with React query, you only have to fetch data once, and as long as the things you're fetching with are the same, it can use the cached data. So now we can use that cached data, we can start fetching early and have it ASAP. Do need to actually render that feed though. Full border slate feed. And here we're not handling, okay, so we'll say if not user loaded or I think that the is signed in was coming from here before. Yeah. We'll delete those. No, we don't even need that. And that should be a much better state in the browser. Yeah, you'll see that this comes in first, and then we have the loading state for the rest of the page, and then the rest comes in right after. Don't need that anymore. The other thing we can do to like more properly simulate this is always return here so you guys can see this is now the behavior when the rest of the page hasn't loaded just yet, which is a much better behavior. Good stuff. Cool. Looking great so far. Let's get that committed. Loading states. One more thing, just because it's bugging me. I want to make the text bigger on the post. So let's do that. The actual post here, class name equals text XL. Yeah, looks a good bit better. How do I have this set there? That's 2XL might be better for this. Yeah, that looks a lot better. We can rock with this. Cool. Time to actually make posting work? Yeah, time to make posting work. I'll commit that. Yep, easiest way to get started with something like this, command click. So the one problem we're going to have is actually knowing who you are as a user and if you have permission. Right now, we don't have anything set up around permissions with tRPC because we didn't use create Next.auth. Thankfully, it's a somewhat easy problem to fix. We just have to dive in and fix it. So What I like to do is attach the auth state to the context inside of each query. So right now we have access to Prisma directly in CTX. We don't have anything else. If I go to definition here, oh, it's going to go through tRPC source. So this is one of the few times where we actually open up, not root, but the tRPC file. You almost never need to edit this file. So we see here you want to create, you want to modify the request context or create a new middleware or type of procedure. And those are actually the two things we want to do here. So let's dive right in. So the first thing we need is the session. We don't need this create inner tRPC context thing, because this is useful for like testing stuff. So honestly, I'm just gonna yoink, yoink. Skip this helper. Probably useful if you're testing. I'm not writing unit tests for this, and even if I was, I wouldn't be testing at that boundary. Kill that as well. But in here, there's data that we don't have that I need. How do I actually get the user info at this point? Well, within options, we actually have a request. So I'm no longer going to underscore escape that, because we do actually want to use this. Const request equals ops. This is a Next.js request from an API, which you can actually pass to stuff in Clerk, like const user equals get user. Sorry, get auth. Because technically we're not going to fetch the user from Clerk each time. Since Clerk is using, what's it called? JWTs, it's able to verify on your server whether or not this user is authenticated or not using the signature of the JWT, allowing them to skip a callback to their server just to be sure the user is authenticated. So this lets us know for sure this is this user and give us a little bit of info about them. Specifically, signed in or signed out auth object, which has the behavior of if they are signed in or not. I could just throw this directly on. Honestly, it's probably the easiest thing. And now when we call this in other places, it will all behave as expected. Super handy. The magic here is now when I use it in a procedure. So we won't always necessarily have auth, but we can enforce, but we can make a procedure that enforces that we do. The easiest way to do that is to extend the public procedure with a new middleware. It's not the same as a middleware in Next.js where it runs on an edge function. It's just a process that runs before your main request processing. Super helpful for things like attaching auth and making sure users actually authenticated. Since we're already attaching the auth earlier, we can verify here very simply. Const enforce user is authed. We're going to continue using the T helper from tRPC. Middleware. Oh, look at all that. Good thing there's so many people writing code like this, so it's that easy to just autocomplete our way through. We do need to attach the session here of CTX session CTX.session. And this should enforce that session exists. Sadly, we're using signed in or signed out. Let's clean that up a little bit, actually, because I don't want this to be a signed in or signed out state. User dot. Oh, this is actually, we'll call this sesh for now. Const user equals sesh.user. And user can be null or undefined. That seems more reliable. Cool. We'll call that user instead of session because that's what that is. Should we call it current user? Yeah. Better naming. And of course, right as I'm starting to make progress with this, my laundry goes off. But more importantly now, this will always return with current user because if it doesn't have a current user, it's going to throw an authentication error. This also should be a tRPC error. And a tRPC error will have codes. Import tRPC error in this file? I guess so. Code. Ta-da. Now to actually use it, all I have to do is const private or export const private procedure equals. That is not how that works. We'll just extend that, not user use, enforce user as auth. And now we have a private procedure that when used will always have an authentication object. And now we can make a new protected procedure. If I go in here, we can make a new key. Oh, look at that. We don't want this to be public. We actually want this to be a private procedure. And this will have context, which actually has more info than previously. So it needs to be wrapped. We're not actually doing anything in it yet. I should probably do that. Wrong buttons. Const user or author ID equals ctx dot current user dot ID. You'll notice we have all of that info from the current user because we've asserted that they exist. If I go back to the procedure before, that's a public procedure, or even if I was to just change this from private to public, you'll see we don't actually know current user exists because it could be null or undefined. But when we switch it to private, we know it has to exist. Super, super convenient. This makes life way easier, and you have this procedure that is guaranteeing that the user is, again, authenticated. What is this upset by? Oh, there's no await, so it's not technically async yet. So we can deal with that. This needs data. It's currently upset because we don't have content, I'm assuming. Yes, content is declared but not defined. But where do we get that from? We don't have an input. Again, tRPC makes these things magic. We do need to tell it what input we want here, though. In this case, we should use one of the core technologies that makes stuff like tRPC so powerful, something we haven't touched on just yet, but we're going to be using a lot from here on out. Zod. Zod is a validator often used for forms. I'll look it up quick. Zod was invented originally to validate that a given piece of data does match a specific shape. So if you want to make sure that you got an object where you have a user ID that's a string that's a certain length and all these other types of properties, Zod makes it very easy to do that. There's a ton of cool things in here, one of which we got added recently that is very helpful. I wonder, is it included in the docs? It is. z.string.emoji, which makes sure that a string is a valid emoji. So in this case, we want to do a z.object that has content, which is z.string.emoji .min 1. We did 280 char in the database, so that works for me. And now we know that content is a string that is one character, or that is more than one character, or one or more characters and 280 or less characters. And that's all you have to do to guarantee that. But how do we use it? Input. And now it's right there. Content string, and we know that exists again because if it doesn't, tRPC will throw the error for us, and a user can't actually call this without passing this validation. So I can put content safely there. And now, oh, I forgot to put input.content. And that is totally safe. Ta-da! Magic. If we want, we can return the post. So return post. And that's all it is. It's that simple to make an API endpoint that does something this important. And if I go back to the client, we can actually make this work relatively quickly. I will go to create post wizard, const mutate equals API dot. That's pretty handy. Mutate will have an input. Oh, we're not actually using it yet. But if I call mutate without putting anything in it, it should get pretty mad at me for that. Yeah, cool. Expects 1 to 2 arguments, but it got 0. That's what I expect. We can fix that pretty easily. So if we go down to here, sure. I don't feel like managing the state here. It is much easier to do this all outside of React. I think onKey press is bad. onKey down. Cool. Now we have the on key down. Yeah, I don't want to do this way. I want to do this the boring old school React way. So we'll have const input set input, sure. Values input. This needs to be type. Well, let's stop complaining now. Oh, use state isn't imported. There we go. Also, this doesn't need to be typed because we're passing it a string, so the type is known. Again, you very rarely need to declare types, only for inputs. Here, that all is behaving correctly. And we can just add a dumb submit button for now. Button on click equals there. Again, Copilot doing its thing. That all looks correct to me. We go back here. It looks ugly, but if I post this, click post, nothing happened. But if I refresh, nothing actually happened. Interesting. Did we get an error? Unauthorized. Maybe I didn't set something up correctly on my context setter there then. If no context current user, throw unauthorized. User. Oh, that should have worked. Console.log sesh. I'll just log both of those real quick. Okay. Oh, because user doesn't, that's so annoying. It doesn't actually have user. It just has user ID and if session exists or not, because it doesn't have the info that we need. Well, the type that that's giving is incorrect then, because we're getting back user from get auth, even though user is undefined. Just some bad types on Clerk's part. I will bug them about fixing that in the future. If this isn't going to come through with that info, it shouldn't mislead in such a way. So now that we know, all we're going to get back is user ID to know that it's a signed in person. We'll do that. Cool. So let's grab the user ID. That is what I was getting here, right? Yep, cool. And user ID is what we're going to use. We will also use that here. Now, if we actually go back to the code where we're doing this, it's going to be type erroring, of course, because we don't have current user.id. We have user ID, which we know exists, because if it didn't, it would have thrown way ahead of time. And now, I did this all correctly. Go back to Chrome. Try once more. Again, we're not seeing anything happen, but this time if I refresh, we'll have the new post in here. Ta-da! I'm immediately noticing some things. Specifically, it's out of order, and also we don't need to be doubling up posts anymore. So let's go to feed, stop doing this, because that's awkward. So we don't need the question mark anymore, because we know it exists. And if we go to where we're actually fetching the data, it was in the wrong order. The best way to fix that would be in here. Is that not? Yeah, order by. That's what I thought it was. I'm forgetting the specific syntax for this in Prisma. I could just look it up, but yeah, let's just do it. Prisma order by. Filtering and sorting, cool. Is it sort, not order? Oh yeah, cool. It's just a thing underneath. Order by. created at descending. Cool. So now it will be ordered by created at stuff in reverse order. If we go back here, refresh. Took a second to load, but here we are. Now it's in the correct order, where this was 2 minutes ago. This was 19 hours ago. We can now post with different emojis, and it works. You'll notice, though, it didn't automatically load and set stuff. It's not even actually clearing this input. There are some quick ways to fix all of that. I will show you. The easiest is to, on the client, update once the post has happened. So the first thing we want to do is deal with the loading state. So if a mutation is happening, we want to render things a little different. So in here, we'll do mutate is loading. It will say is posting so that this has a better name. We'll go in here, say disabled equals is posting. And I'm also going to append a class name. And we don't need to do that just yet. Ideally, we would dim this. We'll get there in a bit, but for now, we just want to make sure the input is disabled while a post is occurring. And we want to make sure this behaves a certain way on success. So on success, we want to do something. In this case, we want to set the input to empty, but we also want to update the existing post on the screen. The easiest way to do that is to grab the context of the whole tRPC cache through the API context call. So say ctx equals API dot use context. And in here, ctx dot invalidate. I forgot the. Is there a better way to do this? Yes. I see it. Or that it? No. Dot, yeah, invalidate. No? What's upset? What's this upset about? Oh. Because it's a promise. That I get why it's upset, but we don't actually care because in here, this doesn't care about what's going on with the promise. So if I put a void in front, that tells TypeScript, hey, we don't care. This is just a thing we want to have happen in the background automatically. So now when I make a new emoji post, I'll put a skull, post, disappears, and the post appears directly underneath. That's all the core functionality complete for the main app and its functions. Truly magical. Git commit. I want to do my usual piece by piece. I saw a console log in there I don't necessarily want. So we'll go delete that in a sec. Working posts. Now we have posting actually working. Pretty cool. But I want to make sure users don't spam posts. That would be really bad. And the easiest way to limit the amount of posts a user can make is to use a rate limiter. A rate limiter is a pretty common pattern. It's used to enforce this thing can only be hit this many times. Usually you use the user ID or their IP address to enforce that. I'm going to show you just how easy it is to protect based on their user ID. Easiest way to use this, or the easiest way to set up a rate limiter is using Upstash. They are a fantastic service for everything from Redis to Kafka to cron jobs to event management. All the annoying things to do in serverless are handled pretty well by them. And one of the things they have is an awesome package for rate limiting. So there's a little console button here you can't see. I can see it just fine though. Sign in with GitHub. Again, if a service doesn't have sign in with GitHub, can we really trust it? We're going to create a new database for this. We'll name this chirp rate limiter. We specifically want it to be regional, not global, because if it's global, it might not distribute correctly if people are spamming, and regional just guarantees this thing's going to exist in one place. It might block for a little bit. Since we're in US West 2, probably want to put this there. It's now being prepared for us. While it's being prepared for us, I'm going to search Upstash rate limiter. I've talked about this package on Twitter a bunch already. You might have seen it before, but it is so helpful. All you have to do to use it is install it. Should probably be installed in dev only, but it doesn't matter too much. I also need to install Upstash Redis. There's a lot of places you can do the rate limiting at. I'm going to do it just straight up inside of the tRPC post function because that's the easiest place. We're going to const rate limit is new rate limit redis.from environment. Only problem here is the from environment expects it. It even says here when we hover over, I've got Upstash's type definitions are incredible. This tries to load Upstash Redis REST URL and Upstash Redis REST token from your environment using process.environment. We don't have either of those, but if we go back here, show you if we scroll, they have all these different ways to hit it. But if we go to here, is it the REST URL that they want? I didn't think. Yeah, it is the REST URL and REST token. So I can click copy here, go back to my .env, paste this all. And I can also, more importantly, go over to Vercel and paste it all in there as well. Chirp, settings, environment variables, paste, check, 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 save. And with just that one change, we now have the ability to rate limit using this rate limiter. It's currently going to set a rate limit of 10 requests per 10 seconds. I want to be a little more strict than that. Let's do 3 per minute. So instead of 60s, we'll do, or 10s, we'll do 1M. Change that to 3 requests per 1 minute. And if I scroll down to the mutation, we have the author ID. Const limited equals await. I think this actually returns success. So when we call rate limiter.limit, this is going to add a tick in their little checker, and it will tell us, hey, are we able to do this or not? Also, just realized we lost our TypeScript server at some point during these changes. Cool, that fixed it fast. Success. And from here, if not success, throw new tRPC error. Is there a rate limit code? There is not. Too many requests. Same difference. And now, if a user tries to post too often, this will immediately throw and prevent them from doing that. It is that easy to add a rate limiter. To anybody saying that this stack isn't production ready or can't scale, here you go. That's all it takes. To on a serverless environment without impacting your database or external anything, we now guarantee that this can't be taken down with just straight up spam. It's so easy to make changes like this, and you can't even get this far if you're not authorized. You have to have a valid cookie to get this far, and then as you spam, you'll get kicked out. We can limit by IP address, we can limit by so many other things, but with this one simple change using Upstash, it's that easy to keep users from spamming us. Obviously, we need to commit that. Now we're production safe. So cool. What else do we have to do? Well, it would be nice to show on the client if an error occurs, like if we try to post and we can't because there isn't an emoji, like if we type normal text and we try to post, it's going to fail, but we're not seeing that anywhere. I would like it to be a toast, honestly. That tends to be the easiest thing. So let's do React toast. React Hot Toast is probably my favorite toast solution nowadays. There's a bunch of them in React, and they're all pretty good. And here are the instructions on how to set things up. We're going to go npm install React Hot Toast. While it's installing, we're going to go put that somewhere. Again, they said put it somewhere where it's pretty high up. Nothing higher up than app. And ta-da. Now that's at the top of the app. We can toast wherever else. The easiest place to toast is on error. So if I go here, on error, import toast dot error. Failed to post. Please try again later. It's probably not the best error, but we'll show you what that looks like really quick. Can go here. Post. Failed to post. Please try again later. Again, it's that easy to add some of these things. I would like for the toast to appear at the bottom rather than the top. I think you can customize that in Toaster. Yep, look at that. We want bottom center. So if we go back to app TSX, bottom center. And now when we get an error, it won't get in our way because it'll appear on the bottom instead. Pretty cool, huh? Like, it's that easy to do these types of things in React and this stack. Obviously, that's just a traditional React thing, but here we have the error message coming all the way through. We're not getting the error message just yet, but const error message equals e.data.zod error dot. Is it field or, yeah, field errors dot message? And this will either be a string array or undefined. So if type undefined, what? Okay, so we know our message is a string array. So, okay, cool. Let's matter with the non-null assertion. Can I do if error message and error message 0? And then not do that? Cool. I can do that. Else. And let's see what this looks like now. Oh, look at that. We didn't actually get the message through. That's annoying. Can I just console log Zod error? Don't care. Zod error object, field errors, content. Okay, that's annoying. So the type's just wrong. Zod error dot field errors dot content. There, that's the error message we're looking for. Haha, now that is the correct message. That is what we were looking for. And if we want to give a custom message, again, Zod makes this trivial. We go to the actual place where this is defined, create, in here, in emoji, we can put a custom error of only emojis are allowed. Now when we try to post without an emoji, we'll get a different message coming from the server. So this is a message the server created in the validation process that then gets displayed on the client. Super cool. Truly magical. And if I clear that and post something else like an arrow pointing, I hit post twice because post isn't disabled when a loading state is occurring. So we should do that quick too. Is loading is posting. We can also put a loading state in here pretty trivially. That would look nice. Let's do that. We'll say value does not, or input does not equal empty string. And we'll render button. And we can say is posting cool. That loading spinner doesn't appear in the right spot at all. That's fine. We can make this bigger first. Size equals 20 div. Also should probably just hide the button and not is posting. We don't need to do the disabled state. We'll just become this instead. Class name equals flex, flex call. It doesn't need to be flex call. Justify center. And I'll just say true for now. Yeah, it looks right. That looks super nice. Skull, post, loading state, appears. Ta-da, look at that. Good UX. Only thing left here is submit on enter press, which is not too hard to do. On key down. I'll wrap this with the wrong bracket type. I bet this will even autocomplete. Look at that. Fantastic. Now, put a new emoji, press enter, loading state, and the post has been made. Magical. Don't feel like going through all those changes, so we're just going to commit it all at once. Posting, loading, states, plus toast. If I was doing this for real, rather than waiting for the server to block on those validations, I would much prefer to do it on the client side using something like Zod and React Hook Form, so we could use the same validator to check on client, hey, is this valid or not? Also using React Hook Form to manage the input state is much better than doing the chaos I was doing here, where it's actually in React state. This is how you get that weird sticky key behavior where you're typing and then keys don't appear and then they all appear at once. It's because we're actually re-rendering all of this on every key press. Far from ideal, just wanted to get this working fast. I would absolutely gut that for React Hook Form if this was for real though. Cool. Big things that are left are the profile view and post view. I would like for clicking the profile picture or the title here to bring me to their profile. But I would also like for clicking this or anywhere else in the post to bring me to this post. Both of these will be separate pages with separate views. The easiest way to get started when you want to make a new route in Next.js pages directory is usually take the one you want, copy paste it. So we need 2 new routes that are going to have a specific matching syntax. So it'd be nice to have like the @ syntax like we're used to on Twitter for the profile, but we'll start with the post, which we'll need to indicate separately. So we'll do post, paste index.tsx in here, but this needs to be marked somehow. So we will do id.tsx. And now we will be getting, now when we use the Next.js router, ID will be a thing we have access to. Very helpful. And for the actual route outside here, I'm going to copy paste again. We're going to rename this one to be slug.tsx. So this will catch on everything that isn't in this folder. So it won't catch on post, it won't catch on API, it won't catch on any new files we make in here, but it will catch for everything else, in this case @ stuff. So this page will catch when we do localhost 3000 at Theo. We'll do at t3.gg. And it's going to catch here, which right now the page is the exact same. But if I was to replace what it renders by scrolling down here, we were to change this to profile view, then we'll see this is a different route. If we go back here, it will still render normally. First thing we should do is actually get links working to these posts or to these new pages. So honestly, I'm just going to delete everything else in here. That cleared out a lot fast. Do we even need the user info really? We don't. Cool. Nice, simple. Rename this to profile page. Honestly, let's do the same for in here. Post, or no, single post page. Now we have these two separate files that have, or that represent different routes. I'm gonna close all the things we're not using at the moment. Now we need to go to our post view, which we have here, and we want to make these links. So we're going to use the Next.js link component. The reason we're using that instead of just an A tag is when you use the link component, the routing will actually occur on this device rather than occur, words are hard. The reason we're using the link component is that it will prevent the routing from triggering a full browser refresh, so we don't have to wait for the server to get data, send us a whole new HTML page. Instead, it can happen in the single page app style where you click a button, it can immediately start loading the next page. And Next is smart enough to start prefetching things in the background too. It's a really powerful pattern. So we change the href to be / at $author.username. Nice. Now that will work. And I would like for this, or clicking the from now part here, to, no, because the dot's going to be linked to, whatever. If the dot links to the post, that makes intuitive sense because the whole thing's going to link to the post. That auto close that. I also want to turn off auto closing tags. It's more annoying than helpful. And this needs to be /post/ and then the post ID. Post.id. There we go. Now post.id matches this, and author username is that. We can click either. It will load profile view, or we click here. It's still going to say profile view because I forgot to rename it. We will rename this quickly to say post view. There. And now we have routing working. Pretty cool. I might not be the biggest fan of file-based routing, but it is super powerful to be able to define some files and have a whole linked system like that working correctly. Let's quickly add that all. New files. Also, quick note on git add -p if you're still using that. It does not trigger on new files, so you'll have to manually add new files. That's why I just did the -a there. New files for new routes. Here's where we get into some of the fun magical things that even tRPC diehards might not be familiar with. I actually learned about these things when I was working on this project, and they're super cool, especially if you want to not necessarily do the full SSR pass on every page, but you do want to be able to embed metadata. Let's take a look. So right here, you can see we have this title create T3 app on every page. That's not what we want to name this. We'll probably rename the homepage to Chirp. Let's head down here. Cool. Chirp. Thinking. Honestly, I think a bird would be a funnier. And no, because we have the favicon, which we'll deal with later. This could be the default on every page. Let's do that. So we're going to throw that in app. When you throw head info in app, it will be the default. But then when you put it in other files after, that will override. So we no longer need that guy. Hop in here. No longer need the icon. We need to rename this to be post. We'll just leave the title here for post. Title here. A couple of these. Profile. I would like for this to be the actual profile for this user though. So how do we do that? Well, the first thing we should do is define a tRPC query, but we don't really have a place for it yet. So let's start by creating a new subrouter that makes more sense for it. We'll create a file. We'll name this one profile.ts. I'm going to be lazy and go yank that. We'll rename this from PostRouter to profileRouter. We will kill everything inside of it. So we don't need any of that anymore. I don't think we need the rate limiter either for this at least. Oh, we don't need a lot of stuff that's in here. Simply public procedure. So we'll start from here. Pretty simple, empty router. Wow, like almost unnecessary. So first we need to have a way to get the user. And we're going to be using the username to get it. So we'll name this get user by username. It's going to be a public procedure. dot input z dot object, username z dot string, dot query. I will admit that this stuff getting in the way as you're typing is really annoying. It's nowhere near as bad on like normal resolutions, but when you're on this, like I'm scaling 720p when I stream and record, which makes it look a little rougher than it is. So hopefully that won't be quite as rough in your environment. I have one too many parens here. And now all I have to do is get the data. The easiest way to get what I'm looking for here. Oh, the Clerk client call there is incorrect. It's going to be get user. And get user needs to be user ID. So get user list. And this needs to be an array. The easiest solution there is to make it one. If no user not found, we'll do that. So we're only grabbing this one user from in there because we only want the first one. Theoretically, if username finds multiple, we wouldn't want multiple, we just want the first one. So yeah, that should return the user. We don't even need context because we're not doing anything with Prisma here. So if we want to go use that in here, const data equals API dot. Oh, I forgot to actually add the router. So if we again go back to here, we're exporting profileRouter. We go to the root, import, done. Now we have profile dot get user by username dot use query. We need to have a username here. We'll just hard code mine for now. If is loading, if no data, return div 404. And then we know we have data. We'll just render oh no, this is going to be another one of those where we have way too much data on the client. We'll take a quick look. It is almost certainly add data. If we go take a look at this quick, click here. Yep, that's way more data than we want, so we have to do the filter again. Time to break that filter function out since we're using it in more than one place. I'm going to make a folder in server helpers. And back to posts, we're going to yoink this guy. Yoink. New file in, I made the helpers. Filter user for client.ts. Export. And when we move this out, we just did a small, subtle, but one of my favorite things that happens with tRPC. If you scroll through this file, you'll actually notice there are no type definitions in this file at all, because all input is done through validators like z.object, z.string. This isn't a type definition. This is a validator. A type definition is inferred from the validator, but this is not a type definition. And then when you actually return something, this isn't a type definition either. This is inferred from the return. All of tRPC is built through inference and strict validation, which allows you to have guaranteed inputs and outputs always of the correct shape. Even here, if you wanted to make sure the shape of the output was always correct, you can actually do an output validator that will trim off data that you don't necessarily want. So I could do dot output. I think I had to do it earlier. Dot output and put an output validator there. Super cool pattern. I haven't started using it just yet because usually I prefer to filter in line here. So filtered or filter, user for client, user. And there we go. Now if I refresh this, you'll see we get way less data back. We're just getting ID, profile image, and username. And that's all we really want here. So now that we have all of that info, we can do things with it. I'm rendering the data user. But one thing you might have noticed is when I refresh this, it takes a sec to load, which means we're not actually getting the updated head and metadata here. I don't want this to wait. I want to have this data immediately. Your intuition might be get server-side props, but the problem with get server-side props is I will lose all of the typing of that data, because if I export const get server-side props, this function is going to run on every request to this page once this is deployed on Vercel, which sounds great in principle, but it's going to block every request. It's not going to have cached pages. It's going to take quite a bit of time to spin up a lot of the time. And actually getting the types from here to my client sucks. And most importantly, it's not actually using tRPC to load any of the data at all. So can we get around all this? This is where that fun tRPC thing I was talking about earlier comes from. We're going to use the SSG helper. The SSG helper is a super cool feature where we can pre-hydrate some data ahead of time. So instead of get server-side props, we're going to do get static props. Using get static props doesn't mean that this can't rerun. It just means that it will be treated mostly as a static asset, and we can trigger revalidation when and how we choose. Here, we first have to create the SSG helper. So I'm just going to copy and paste this. Specifically here, paste. The context, how do I want to do our context? The only real thing we need is Prisma. So we need to grab the app router. Context is going to type error because it's missing things. Yeah, we need Prisma. Import. Not import. Cool. This is also going to be missing user, which we could fetch here. We don't really need it right now. So I'm just going to do user null. That's the user ID. Nice. And I need to import super JSON. There we go. Now we have this little SSG helper. So what's the point of this guy? Well, it offers us some pretty cool superpowers. I also forgot to give this a type. Doesn't really need it. What am I using that for? I'm not. Cool. We don't even need the context. Oh, wait, no, yeah, I do. I need this for the params. The easiest way to type this is to put the type on the actual variable definition for the function. Get static props is a type that Next provides for us. And here we're going to see we're getting an error because we are not actually returning a result. If I go down here, we can return props. And right now we're not returning anything, but it will stop complaining at the very least. We need to actually do the fetching. Here's where the magic of, or here's where things get really magical with the SSG helper. First, we need the slug. Const slug equals context.params.slug. Here we can throw no slug. Should probably do something different for that, like return you to a different page or whatever. Not the best behavior. Again, just making this nice and easy. Now we need to actually use the slug. This is the same slug we're going to use to do fetching on the client side. So we should make this pattern really consistent. What's this arrow? No, oh wait, oh cool. We're about to fix that anyways. We need to use the SSG helper. SSG.profile.getUserByUsername. That's pretty cool. Oh, we don't want to call it directly. We want to call it prefetch. Prefetch is a really cool helper that lets us fetch this data ahead of time and then hydrate it through server-side props. We're going to await so that it's actually there. And now, when we're in here, we need to dehydrate it. If we look in the example here, you give tRPC state SSG.dehydrate. And what this does is it takes all the things we fetched, it puts it in a shape that can be parsed through Next.js server-side props, in this case static props. And then on the app side, since we're wrapping with tRPC, we'll actually hydrate all that data through React Query. To put it in simpler terms, this means the data is there when the page loads, and this isLoading state will never be hit. So if I was to put a log in here, if isLoading console.log is loading, that won't ever actually get hit because the inputs are the same. Oh, we haven't given it static paths. This is one other thing you need to know with get static props. You need to tell Next which paths are valid. I don't really care here. Normally, this is used to generate those paths on the server. You could give it, I should show you the syntax before I do anything else. This needs to return something with paths, which is an array, and then a fallback behavior. We'll say fallback is blocking because we want to make sure we actually generate them. In paths, I could put the array with all the strings here, like if this had at t3.gg, then when this gets built, it's going to generate the page for my user, but I don't care if it generates them ahead of time. It can generate them on load. So we're going to do that instead. What is this? Oh, it's async. It does not need to be async. Cool. Now we have all those paths, and you'll see here, isLoading is still being hit because the slug is still including the at. So that isn't actually fetching here. So we should remove that from the slug. So const safe slug, or I should say const username equals slug dot replace at with empty string. And now no loading state gets hit because this is generated ahead of time. I know it's a small thing, but it is actually super cool. And since this will only ever change, or at least the core data here will only ever change if the username changes, which would be a different page anyways, or the user's profile picture changes, which we can trigger as a server-side update, this will never change. It's a super safe way to have statically generated pages with correct metadata. Because now we can use that data in here. We're currently fetching isLoading that way, but I can give props a type here too. Type of or infer, and we should define the props type. So type page props equals infer get static props type. And now this is the page props. The only reason I'm doing this is I specifically, really, I forgot how awful the types are. Oh, because we don't have something custom in here. I want the slug. Well, I guess I want the username. So now that I've put that there, this should know, should, and doesn't know that I'm returning username. I'm really annoyed that these helpers don't work. Well, I don't care because we know what the actual type is here. We have a username on this because we returned that there. And if I console log username, we should see that appear, t3.gg. Awesome. The props coming through correctly. And instead of querying that, I can use the username in the query directly. So much simpler. There's now no more loading state. There is just the theoretical no data state. Delete that as well. And now, via just a little bit of magic, oh, all of these are just types. Nice. Aren't those lint rules helpful? Cool. So we have all those types. We have all of this returning correctly, and overall, a much easier way to get data into our client. It's super powerful. Should probably put the actual profile name. I guess the username might be formatted differently, so we can do it that way. Let's start rendering. So we have a lot of good data here. I would like to continue rendering with the same container that we used on the main page here. I think it's time to break that out as a component. The Yeah. All of this. And I will make a new component. We'll call it, yeah, layout.tsx. Not the most clear naming, especially with what's about to change in React, but or in Next, but new tutorials will come out as these patterns change. Export const page layout. I'm just going to be lazy and continue. Oh, no, because FC doesn't have children anymore. Equals props with children. I cannot pass that, right? Nice. Now we have properly typed children of any form at all. Type. Yoink. Delete. Yoink. Is that div? I might need to include. Yeah. I broke that. Oops. Is that because this needs to be its own div? Yeah, it is. Yep, this was the one I did not need to put there. And we'll delete that one extra layer. And yeah, there we go. The side border isn't working because that container's only screen height, I believe. I should probably set a scroll here. Overflow Y scroll. There we go. I'm also going to turn off page scroll because it's just a thing that annoys me. Only certain page, like document pages like blogs and such should probably have scroll on, but I don't like it. Disable page scroll CSS. Disable its over scroll. Aha. And if I did that, then it should no longer, yep. Now I can't over scroll. It just stops when you try. That is how I prefer that. Much better. Cool. So now we have a decent layout, and I can yoink said decent layout for other places, like in here. Not in here, in here. Now we have that same layout with the sidebars. Well, the side borders. Super nice. We should actually make this look pretty. I'm thinking profile picture here, the fancy half cut off, like background color, username in big letters, and then the bar and all the content underneath. Okay. We'll start with the main content image. And we'll make this a separate div first. And throw the username inside of it. Class name, border, B, border, slate 300 we've been doing. No, it's been 400 for sure. Nice. Now we have the padding or the color underneath. We'll do just BG slate 600 for the background color of that for now. Actually, no, I'm going to want that background color to be aligned differently because of how I want the profile picture to fit in here. Wait, no, I can do that with a hack. Cool. Image source equals something that would autocomplete. It didn't. Data dot profile image URL. Also should be image tag because next. Alt equals data dot usernames profile pic. Cool. Should probably enforce that username exists. Too lazy to do that. Need to give this a width and height. Width equals 48. Height equals 48. Cool. Here's where we get to do some fun stuff. Class name equals, we'll do negative. That's going to be too low. B. That's not going to be enough. We'll do 8. Now we're talking. I do need to give this a height, though. H48. Let's see how that looks. Actually looks about right. I'm going to bump this to 64. Also, let's have some fun with positioning. So what I want here is like the profile picture there, half over, half under, just like on Twitter. T3.gg, you'll see it's like half over, half under. And I just want to do that with some CSS hacks. It shouldn't be too hard. We'll do relative for positioning there, because if we make that relative, then we can make this absolute, bottom 0, left 0, ML4. Fantastic. Make this a little bigger. MB8 is negative 32. Half of 96 is... Do I want to do a literal for this so I can update it in one place and have everything adjust correctly? No. What's half of 96? That would be 48, right? Yeah. Cool. So we want 48. That looks pretty much perfect. We also want rounded full. Border. I'm going to do border 2 and border black. I want that thicker. Actually, I want this larger. I was right. And half of 128 is 64, which I'm almost sure there's a built-in value for. Well, that looks fantastic, honestly. Does Twitter not have a white line for the spacing? It makes sense if it didn't. Yeah, it doesn't. The white lines are only on the sides, right? Yeah, they did not do one there. Actually looks nice without it. So we will kill that border bottom. If we wanted to have a background image, we would set it there, but we don't. So yeah, it looks pretty good to me. Where they actually put the... Oh, all of the info goes underneath. Convenient. I'm going to leave that open and close everything else quick because I don't need any of that at the moment. Cool. We want the name here. I'm not going to actually do the name because we just have username. So we could fetch name from what we're getting, but we don't need it. Cool. Instead of this being here, we'll put that there, see where it goes. It's trying. The other thing I could do is put this background and extend it under, but that feels like more of a hack. What I should honestly do is put a spacer here that covers the rest just so I don't have to worry about it. It's the easiest thing. Name equals. Should this be a variable now? Yeah, this should be a variable. Const pro pic size equals 128. Wait, no, because then it can't be parsed. Fuck. Nope. Tailwind problems. That's fine. I could just do it with inline CSS, but yeah, nobody likes that. I'll get roasted way too hard if I do that. Okay, so class name is H64px. Perfect. So now this is serving as like a hidden spacer to give us the right amount of space before doing other things. And this is going to be the container with all of the profile information. So I don't want to apply the font size at this level. I do want to apply padding though. We'll do P2 to start. I think P4 is what we've been going with though. Yeah, that looks about right actually. Honestly, because that's all the other info we're putting there, I'm pretty okay with stopping at that. Just make it like look a little better font-wise. Shouldn't be too hard. Cool. Text to Excel. Again, I like using string templates instead of doing a bunch of weird hacky stuff in JSX. It's going to complain that username might not exist, but it does. I'll fix that later. Cool. Add t3.gg. Let's bold that. Cool. That looks great. And I'm going to do one more div. Border B, border slate 400, W full. Fantastic. And now we can immediately start loading the feed. I might make that top chunk a little smaller because it is pretty massive. Let's do height 36. Yeah, I think this looks fantastic. Especially since it's statically generated, so like the image will be there. I could do BG black for this too, so it doesn't flicker in quite as badly. Yeah. I'm going to commit this because this is a ton of progress. Git status, git add, profile page with SSG helper. Since the posts can change more often, I don't want to include those in the SSG helper. I want those to load on the client side, have everything else cached, and have that just load in automatically. The first thing we're going to need in order to do that is an actual API endpoint that gives us that data. So I'm going to command click here. We don't actually want it in this router. We're going to want this in the posts router because we are fetching posts. We could get profile all posts from profile, but where you put these things arbitrary. I just liked this breakup where post is for post things and profiles for profile things. We can get posts by a specific user ID. So that's what I was thinking we do here. Get posts by user ID is a public procedure. Dot input z dot object, which has a user ID z dot string dot query. Async. We don't even need to do that part. We can just do ctx input. And immediately ctx.prisma.post.findMany, where author ID is input.user ID. Thank you, Copilot. Just saved, formatted automatically. Let's actually use that. If I go back over to slug page, again, just going to close all the others because I am running unlimited screen real estate. Now, I'm going to make a separate component up here. Const profile feed equals, I was going to need a user ID. Oh, props user ID is a string. Const data equals posts dot get posts by user ID dot use query. User ID, props that user ID. Nice. You should have an is loading for this one as well. If is loading, return loading page. If no data, or data.length equals 0, return user has not posted. And then we can return div class name equals flex column. And here's where we're going to need to break out that post view into its own component because I don't want to rewrite it. If we sneak over to the main page again, in here I have post view as well as post with user the type. So we're going to yoink both of these, cut, go to components, post view.tsx, paste, let it complain about a bunch of things that we don't have here. Honestly, what I'll often do when I'm ripping something this big is I'll go to the page it came from. I'll just take all the type defs. Not all type defs, all the imports, wrong word. I'll take all the imports, paste them, delete all the ones we're not using. Usually from bottom up because then it doesn't have a lag when you make changes. Export that. And we're done. Now I go back in here. I import post view on the page. And that simplifies things here a lot. And then here I can data.map post view post equals post. We're not going to have the user info, and I also need to get a key quick. So key equals post.id. But we're not going to have the author information here because I'm not getting that off this. There is a billion ways we could get this. Honestly, though, the right way, because theoretically in the future, we will be interacting with other users' info on this page. Yeah. Since theoretically, if we pass that data from the client side, we could override things incorrectly. And if we intermingle where we're getting posts from, we wouldn't want to create that possibility. So I'm going to go out of my way to make sure whenever we return from the backend, we are returning with the post's user IDs attached. I'm going to make a little abstraction for this of const add users, your data to posts. Sure. And we'll have post be a type that comes from Prisma. It's a type, and we'll make that clear. I'm going to yoink everything I'm doing in this function of the create in here. Did that not work? Oh, it's because that's, sorry, I was just getting confused why that wasn't processing. Put in here, I can just return I don't need any of that anymore. Wow. That's so much simpler now that we've broken that out. Don't need that console log either. I want to make sure that that didn't break in here quick. I think if you return a promise, it doesn't care. Yeah, it doesn't. Nice. Cool. Now that we've handled that, I can go back in here. That's posts. Yeah, that's where I want it to be, posts. So I can dot then add user data to the posts. And now that's the same format as it was before. Full post. And we have everything we need. And I can render this here. Wait, no, I don't want to import anything. I just want to pass this user ID. User ID equals data.id. Imported. Oh, did I not bring the from now over? Oh, yeah, I didn't. My file system back open. That's under, you know, that would be in PostView. Yeah, I'm silly. Again, the dayjs thing's a little weird because you have to extend it like internally, but also means I don't need any of that here. I need that here though. There we go. Isn't that pretty cool? Working profile view with all the content rendering, loading state all handled, totally simple, understandable code, easy to maintain and modify, good loading states, everything's dynamic. Pretty cool. All right, let's commit all that. Render posts on profile page. And we should also quickly make sure this is all working in production because, again, I've just been blindly pushing. And one of the coolest things about this stack and the way we've been building is that it's continually deploying because of Vercel. See all these check marks, which suggests that we haven't had any issues so far. But if I go here, click details, we can see the deploy as it's happening. Make sure that there aren't any issues. Nice. And if we click the link, everything loads in as expected. I can go to a specific profile by clicking the profile picture. Everything's here. I can refresh, and that page content is always here now. If I want to sign in, I click sign in. Continue with GitHub. Now I'm signed in, all in production. Pretty dang cool if I do say so myself. Next is the post view, which can be very similar to what we did with the profile view, but we want to render stuff specific to that one post that we clicked on. Since we made so many changes here, I'm just going to copy paste the file again. Copy slug, paste this into here. But this time, we want to get a specific post's data. We'll be able to delete most of the page layout stuff. I also don't want to have to redefine this proxy helper each time. So I'm going to yoink all of that out to a server helper. Server helper SSG helper dot ds. Cool. Just going to, again, yoink, yoink. Instead of get static props, generate SSG helper. Don't need all that anymore. I can delete all that in favor of this. Delete all that. Move these imports where they belong, all the way back up at the top here. Grab this file, override this once more. Now let's get to work. Need to rename profile page to post or single post page. Leave most of this the same. We do need to get or make an endpoint to just get one post. I'll hop into posts. We're going to need the same user data when we do that. So press page up accidentally, get post by ID, public, or since it's already named post like the router is, I don't think I need to do post.get post by ID. So get by ID, public procedure. Input is z.object. And here, I'm going to do the same thing we did earlier. ctx.prisma.find or post. Oh, look at that. All auto completing. Too many of those. But I do want to get the additional stuff here. So dot then. It's not dot filter, it's add user data. Oh, I would just want to do that for this one. Okay, I guess this one's more complex. So it needs to be a function. That's fine. Once post equals await. And then if no post, throw new tRPC error, code not found. Oh. Since add user data to posts is mapped, you do it that way. TypeScript died. TypeScript died again. That's a funny one. Cool. And that should all now work as expected. And if I go back to here, instead of slug, we want this to be ID. We don't need to do any replacements here. And we're not fetching by profile anymore. We're fetching dot by posts. And just like when we call the API, we can autocomplete our way here, get by ID. This needs to have, oh, I need to do dot prefetch again. I'll pass the ID down. Here we don't have username anymore. We have ID. We don't have this query anymore. It's posts.get by ID. And this gets passed ID. I'm going to format this nice and fancy because why not? We'll do data.post.content. Data.author.username. That like that. Isn't that cool? We can delete pretty much everything here. Which means we can delete everything up here. Because we just want one post here. And that's it. Delete all that stuff because it's not being used. And if this was done correctly, should be able to click on that and load just that post. Would you look at that? All done. You can go back to the home page, click any one post, and it will load that post separately with its own URL. You can even see in the title bar, it's the correct thing there. What's crazy is since this is happening on the server, that title is actually correct in the HTML coming down to the client. So if I was to, actually, I'll just push it and show you guys in production. Git status, commit, separate SSG helper, metadata fixed for, or not even metadata fixed, it's just full post page. Git push, wait the 40 to 50 or so seconds before that is deployed. And this should be done now. Cool, it is. So the cool thing I specifically wanted to show is if we go to one of these posts, the first time it'll take a second to load because it's generating it. But from here on out, it's going to be instant. But even cooler, if we look at the HTML the server is sending back, so not in the DOM. If we right-click inspect, obviously that's going to be correct. The React code is running on the client. It's going to keep things up to date. We actually go in here and look at the HTML the server sends initially. Response, format. In here, the title is correct because this is being generated on the server. When React does its first pass through the app in Next.js, the types are there, the data's there, all from this generate SSG helper, hydrating the data ahead of time and then dehydrating it into the DOM. That means that the HTML the client gets is correct immediately. And once that's cached on the CDN, it will be downloaded immediately too. So this works great for not having to worry about your SEO. If you want to have SEO data without breaking out of tRPC's patterns, there you go. All of the things that I need to wrap this page with, all the things I need in the head are fetched ahead of time, and I can block on that trivially. It's so powerful. I love these patterns. You can set custom refetch and revalidate times here as well. No real need for that since none of this data can change, but in the theoretical future where it could, this is where you would put that. Ignore the outfit change, pretend we're where we were. I have one small thing I want to add that's going to cut the build times on Vercel in half. I already have a video about this, but I think it's important to include. You shouldn't be checking your types in lint on Vercel builds. There's no reason to, because Github CI is free and it's right there. So what do I mean? How do we use it? I'll show you real quick. If I've learned anything over the years, it's that writing YAML files sucks. Rather than writing the YAML file, I actually asked ChatGPT to write it for us. So I went to ChatGPT and I said, write me minimal Github CI YAML file that installs node modules, runs TypeScript, type checking, and also runs lint. The reason I'm choosing to do this on GitHub is where our code lives, and the validation of our code should live with our code. The thing that builds and deploys it should be separate. Our actual building and deploying, at least for pull requests, should not be blocked on if type checks pass. GitHub's role is to make sure the code is correct. Vercel's role is to deploy the code that we give it. So I try to separate these things. It makes the performance of your CI pipeline significantly better if you do. So I'm going to yoink this. We're going to we can even copy this. This is the path that it thinks you should put it in, and it is correct. So I'm going to make a new file, not in there. Here's a new file, copy code, paste. Here is environment variables. I actually asked ChatGPT how to do that. They have this example here. So honestly, I can just copy the whole file again. We can go in here. The environment variables we need are all listed here. Node environment will come with the environment itself, so we don't have to do anything there. But the database URL, this is the one we need to change. So, or we'll have something for. We're just checking that it's a URL, so any valid URL will work here. Copy the name perfectly. Database URL, GPS, fake.com. Cool. And now we have everything we need. Add CI. And now we have additional CI that will run on GitHub separately from Vercel. So if we go to GitHub and check this out, you'll see here we have a separate build running that isn't on Vercel. If we were to go check on Vercel, this build's going to take the same 47 or whatever seconds because we haven't changed anything here. We just added this additional check. And this check's going to run lint. And actually, I don't think we have a command for type check yet, so that might fail. Yeah. You can see here, this failed, missing script type check. Okay, we can add that quick. If you're not familiar, in package.json, you have scripts. These are all different things that you can run from the terminal through NPM, and we need to add one for this. So type check. The easiest way to type check is to just run tsc. I guess no omit is fine. Thank you, Copilot, for making our code even better. And now, if I push this, add type check command. Now it's going to go run and build on Github CI. But how do we actually disable it on Vercel in order to get faster builds? It's pretty simple. We tell Next.js in the next config that we don't want it to do that. So for TypeScript, we tell it ignore build error is true. For ESLint, we tell it ignore during build. And we can also SWC minify true. It's an experimental flag for using SWC as the minifier instead of using Babel, I believe, which should speed things up quite a bit as well. All of this should result in our builds being notably faster. So we can add that too. P. Ignore build errors on Vercel. SWC minify. If I did this correctly, we should now see separately running. Nice. Before I made this change, it was 43 seconds. I went down to 28. So yeah, you should expect better performance. But more importantly, you'll have different steps failing when you file a pull request. Generally, I don't recommend merging straight to main when you're still working on a project solo. Totally fine. But in GitHub, you can actually lock the main branch. You can go in here, branches, main, and set up a protection rule. So you can't just push straight to main. You have to file a pull request. Even on solo projects, I'll often do this because I like pull requests as a way to force myself to review my work and make sure things are okay before they're deployed. And generally, it's nice to have that step and just see, like in here, you have different checks for different things. So I have my CI for build, and I have my Vercel environment separately built here. Generally, really nice to do things this way. The final thing to finish this project off is we need to give it a real domain. Vercel makes this super easy. You can buy domains straight from there. It might not be the cheapest, but it's so convenient to just have all your domains in one place. And I buy pretty much all my domains on Vercel now. Once you have it in here, you don't actually have to spend much time in this page. There is some magic. So if you buy a domain on Vercel and you want to add like email servers, you click the add email button and there's a G Suite hotkey, there's Proton Mail. All of these DNS records that normally take quite a bit of time to set up are one-click setups, which is so convenient if you've ever configured email servers before. Just a fun aside. What I want to show off is once you have a domain, how to add it to a given project. So in settings, domains, since I already have the t3.g domain assigned to another project, if I was to assign it here, it's going to tell me when I try that I have to move it from Astro to here. And we don't want t3.gg on this project anyways. That's my homepage. We do want a subdomain from it though. So all I have to do is make up the subdomain. Let's come up with something funny. We'll do bird emoji. None of these are good bird emojis. We'll use this one. Oh, is it? You have to like make it the special code. I do this though. Haha. And for any normies, I'll add chirp t3.gg and I'll redirect it to the other domain. Cool. And this domain, it might not look super cool in Chrome, but if you use a browser like Safari that recognizes emojis, ta-da, I think that's cute. So yeah, chirp's now an emoji domain, chirp.t3.gg. You can still use, obviously, I'll close Safari. You can still go to chirp. God, if I could spell, chirp.t3.gg, and it will redirect there. It's all set up through Vercel itself directly. Significantly easier than managing all this yourself. Yeah, I love Vercel's domain stuff. I think that's it, actually, for most of the core functionality. There's a lot of small things I would like to do. You may have noticed that I've hard-coded in a lot of places. Take 100. So we're only going to get the first 100 posts. If I wanted to get more, I would need to be doing pagination with infinite queries. There's a bunch of documentation on how to do that on the tRPC website. Highly recommend checking that out. Those query patterns are really cool for pagination and infinite scroll and a lot of the behaviors that real big apps need. On top of that, probably would go in depth on the way that links work inside of the post view, because right now it's pretty jank. You have to click the time or the username. I would obviously wrap image in a link, but I would also want the whole card to be clickable to go to the post, but you can't have a link inside a link, so you'd have to do some fun DOM hierarchy things there. Totally doable, but not clean. Didn't want to waste too much time here. I would also, in the post creation view, which is in the index file here, create post wizard. This is awful. Don't use state for this. Please use something like React Hook Form. You could even share the validator on the back end and the front end. You can create one emoji validator that is shared, imported on both back and front, and then use the same validator as the input for the mutation, as well as for validating the form. Super fun pattern. I use it all the time, but I didn't feel like setting that up here because this was meant to demo how all the pieces come together. The one last thing is, in the future, it would be pretty nice to have the database synchronized with Clerk, so I don't have to do all of the Clerk calls. It's not too bad because their service responds really fast, and most of the things I'm doing here are well cached. But ideally, we would be actually modeling a post to be directly mapped to a user with a relation, rather than the author ID string here that isn't relationed to anything. There's no binding of this author ID anywhere. We have to, on the server, take these author IDs to go fetch user IDs. In a true relational database, we'd have user in here, and you could do that using Clerk's webhooks to synchronize stuff, but I'm going to hold out for changes I know they're working on to make synchronizing your database with Clerk even easier in the future. It'd be really nice to generate OG image tags that have like the post and the user's name using the Vercel OG image library. This is a super fun thing. I've meaning to play with it. It's a way to generate images trivially with Tailwind-like syntax to actually have metadata when you like post a link on Twitter or Discord or something that shows a nice generated image per route. Super cool to have proper embed support with such a trivial addition. I think it even supports Tailwind, if I recall, which is super duper dope. I think that is everything. This took absolutely forever to make. Multiple days of recording and way more time spent actually building the repo and getting everything just right. I wanted to make this as informative and useful as possible. If you have any issues working on this project, let us know in the comments and come check out our Discord if you haven't. If you become a hardcore T3 stack user, you should get something to support us. This here is the official T3 jacket. We just made these. I love them. I went out of my way to make merch that I actually thought was cool, not just another damn t-shirt. So if you want to rep T3 in the workplace, check these out on shop.t3.gg. This has been quite the project. I really hope y'all appreciate it. Thanks again, nerds. Peace.